Hello, my name is Valerie Novak. I am a disability researcher here in Utah in the United States. I am an Afro-Latina person with short black curly hair, and I'm sitting in a room with white walls. I am here today to talk to you a little bit about how to use data in your nonprofit. There are many ways to use data. There are many types of data and tools to collect and analyze data. There are resources and write-ups available on this page that give you a little bit more detail on how to go about collecting, analyzing, recording data. And I believe some of those uses of data you're probably a little bit more familiar with in your nonprofit work. We are going to look at using data in 3 different circumstances within your nonprofit. Those are using data to support your direction for your programs and projects, as well as for things like funding asks, which is a type of data use and collection I am going to talk a little bit about, but assume that you're quite familiar with. We will also look at when you are collecting data as an organization for a particular project for your consumers or community, such as being a nonprofit that focuses on transportation and wanting to do a research project or survey about how people are using transportation in your community. The last way we're going to look at data is how you take the programs and the work that you're doing in your nonprofit and turn that into shareable data that you can then put in annual reports, put in board reports, put in presentations, or funding requests to continue doing the good work you're doing in your nonprofit. This first use, supportive data, in your grant writing, in your business planning, is something that you may have a lot of experience with. This is looking at reports or data sets maybe put out by other nonprofit organizations or governments that you are then using to show why it is important for you to be doing the work that you're doing. There are a few things I do want to point out when we're using this kind of data to support our asks that you might be missing out on when you're using some of this secondary data sources. Data has gaps. Gaps on demographic identifiers like race or disability status or sexual orientation. There are communities that are clumped together as singular identities, even though they behave in very different ways, for example. And this gives us data that is maybe able to be generalized for a large group of people, but is also missing a lot of information that would give us a better idea of what individual groups, generally marginalized populations, are experiencing. And so it's really important to take a look at where your data may not be giving the full picture because gaps aren't demonstrated. Sometimes we need to be a little bit more specific with the data that we're looking at. Another area we need to be critical at when we are looking for data, particularly from other sources, is that we're not cherry picking data. Data can be manipulated, it can be asked and collected in a way to tell a certain narrative or story. But there is also data that may come out and contradict ours, and it is good data. And it might seem like it contradicts or speaks against what we're asking for. It is important to know what that data says and why there might be tension with what you're seeing in your work in order to truly address what is going on with your community. This also just helps prepare you for what else is out there and what might come back as a pushback or as a barrier to you presenting the problem that you're trying to address. The issues you might come across in gaps and tension in data you find from other sources might be why you end up running your own project to find the data you need in order to address the community concerns that your nonprofit is aiming to help eliminate. This is a very, very time-intensive endeavor, but it does not mean that it can't be done. Nonprofits regularly collect and share data via polls, surveys, focus groups, interviews, which are all tools that would allow you to engage with your communities and collect data from them that you then can share with stakeholders and other community members. The data collection process actually takes months and months to come up with tools that you want to use, to come up with questionnaires that you want to ask, and to then analyze the data. That also takes a significant amount of time. So when you do decide that you want to take on a data project, just know that it is not going to be something that you're able to do with a quick turnaround. There are many reasons for this, the data tool being one of the important ones. So as we talked about those gaps and that misinformation a little bit earlier, part of addressing for that comes in making sure that you have a data tool that does not include your own or other biases to the best extent that you can, and that actually gets you the information that you're trying to get from your community. It is amazing how many different ways people can interpret a single question. And because of that, you will often get information that maybe isn't what you were looking for if you are not very, very intentional about what you ask. And sometimes you'll still get these left field answers, even if you are very intentional in what you ask. And so part of that process of analyzing data also includes what's called processing data, or going through some of the responses you might get. And so to kind of summarize what you would be looking at doing in this process of your own data project would be first to determine what the landscape is of the issue. So that's going to be going back to research that's already been done, reading reports from other nonprofits or governmental organizations, reading academic literature on the topic, and seeing what research has already been done and letting that inform the work that you're going to do going forward. After that, you will need to develop what questions you still have. What are the research questions that you've been led to by the research that you've done? Once you have those questions, you then need to create your tool, your research tool, for how you're going to get the information to answer that question. Whether that's available someplace else, like say this census data, or that's something you're going to need to go straight to the community to do an interview or a focus group to get that information that you're trying to get. So you need to then build that tool, and then you need to recruit your participants. So once you have your participants and your research tool, you get to actually do the research. That part goes by much faster than you might expect. Once you have your data from your research tool, then you get to analyze and see how that data answers those original questions. And then you get to share that information in the format that you choose. That is a very quick and high-level timeline of what running your own project might look like. There is a lot of nuance and information that goes into doing something like creating a research tool. And so we have included a little bit more information in the write-up about this and some resources that can help you make sure that you are efficient and successful in running your own data project for your nonprofit. The third type of data collection that we're going to talk about is data that you collect on and from your organization to share with your stakeholders, your board members, funders, grant requests, things about how you do business, how much time you're spending on certain topic areas, and what kind of outcomes you've had in the work that you're doing. Routinely collecting this data also does not need to be difficult. The information that you might want to collect in order to share with your stakeholders, you might actually already have and just aren't necessarily utilizing tools that allow you to pull out that data quickly and easily, say at the end of the year. Some tools that you can use that you may already have to help build outcome data from your organization include your strategic plan or visioning documents for your nonprofit, and your project management software that you're using. When you're looking at creating or collecting data for your organization, we're going to go ahead and start with your strategic plan. You would have created a visioning document or a strategic plan that outlines the intents and the outcomes you are hoping to accomplish through your programs and services of your nonprofit. From that, you can pull specific metrics that you would like to monitor to indicate whether or not you are going towards that goal. When we do that, we are creating metrics. These are outcomes, goals that we are going to watch and measure and collect for. This would be something you would do, say, at the end of a year as you're planning for the next year, maybe at the beginning of a year if you're a little bit behind. What you're able to do with your project management software is when you've determined a way of measuring these metrics, you can then add that to your note-taking or case management of your projects. This is not something that requires fancy or expensive project management software to do. You could even do something like a Google form for each of your projects that maybe includes some of the factors that you are wanting to measure and the metrics you're looking at. So a basic example of using something like this might be that you have a metric to increase community involvement in your programs and services. Rather than, at the end of the year, relying on your memory or employee reporting to determine how many volunteers were involved or which projects they were involved in, this could be something that is included in note-taking as a routine part of business that you're then able to pull out through the data sources that you have in your project management system to have an easily accessible readout of which programs had volunteers and how many. The way you might do something like this in, say, a Google form or in a Trello is by adding an option. You could do a checkbox, you can do some kind of marker. There's many different options that says something like volunteers. This would allow you to indicate in your project management system which of your projects had volunteers associated with them. Then when you're trying to share that data, say with a board, you're able to say not just we increased community involvement in our programs, but you're able to say something like we increased community involvement by including 15 more volunteers in our projects than we did the previous year. When you make data collection a part of your note-taking throughout the year in a system that brings all of your information together, it makes it much easier to then pull out certain details about each of your programs and services that allow you to present a picture of what you're accomplishing with a little bit more detail than you might otherwise. It will also likely be a little bit more accurate than you trying to go back and figure out that stuff later on after the fact. It is something you can use over time. So you're able to see if you are trending towards your goals year over year. In addition to using things like your strategic plan or your key performance indicators to help you create metrics that you can measure throughout the year, you may also have some information already that you haven't quite looked at as a form of data. Mainly, the hours worked on which projects and the funding that goes to those projects. When you're aware of how much time is being spent on a project by you and your employees, and also how much funding is coming in for those projects and services, there is a lot of data you're able to pull out of that information, such as looking at whether or not the amount of time being spent on certain projects is matching with the amount of funding you're getting for those projects. This can speak to your efficiency. This can speak to what kind of projects you might want to take on in the future, what kind of grants you might want to take on in the future, and whether or not your employee breakdown is working for what your nonprofit is trying to accomplish. The other thing you're able to say just by tracking how much time you're spending on certain projects is where you're dedicating your nonprofit efforts. If your goal is to be in the community working with people, but you're noticing that the majority of your employees' time breakdown is spent, say, in the office doing notes, then you know also as a leader that you have a disconnect in what is happening in your organization, the data that is coming out of that, and what you're trying to accomplish. So doing this regular note-taking collection and data collection is also useful and directional for you as a leader, as well as an ability to share the wins that you have as an organization. But as far as sharing the wins that you have as an organization, data helps put real numbers and people into your outcomes. Being able to say that you worked with 250 consumers is a different experience than just saying we worked a lot with the community this year. Being meticulous and routine about the information that you collect about your projects allows you to be more specific about the outcomes you're having in your community's experiences. But data is still often needing to be shared in a narrative form. And so that's where the sharing comes in as far as annual reports, presentations, infographics, how you want to share what your organization is doing and what data you've collected and the outcomes from that data. This is also something where there is quite a bit of free software available, whether that's doing something in a PowerPoint or Google Slides, whether that's using a Canva or a Prezi. There are many, many softwares available that will allow you to take the kind of numbers into something that is readable and that includes maybe stories from your consumers, that is visual, maybe with graphs and charts and not necessarily just written numbers. This is a time for you to be a little bit creative and engaging in the way that you share these data that you have collected throughout the year. This is also an opportunity for you to visualize how you're trending, whether that's up or down on certain metrics that you've determined year over year. Data is a very big topic to cover, and this video had to be short. So if there's any other questions you have or any way that I can help you in establishing a data collection system for your nonprofit, my information is connected here, as well as the many other resources that you can see on this site. I would very much suggest looking at the storytelling and the grant writing trainings, as both of those will be connected to how and why you collect data. I hope this was useful to anybody who may view this, and good luck in your data collection and your advocacy efforts.